you could really hurt a business, right? We're suggesting things that if you don't know what you're doing could be detrimental, like name changes. Like we'll rename probably 50 or 60 home service companies this year. That is not a task that you enter in lightly, because if you screw that up, you could really screw up their business.
Welcome to the Base Coat Brainiac podcast. My name is Austin Hauser. I am Chief Brainiac over here at Base Coat Marketing. If you own a painting business and you're listening in, you are in the right place. So today, I am pleased to have Dan Antonelli join the conversation. Dan, you likely require no introduction, but for anyone living under a rock, Dan is the president of KickCharge Creative and best-selling author of the book Branded, Not Blanded. KickCharge is an award-winning branding agency that specializes in helping home service businesses redefine themselves and stand out with disruptive brands. Dan, thanks for being here, man.
Good to be here, Austin. I was loving the intro with your branding and your brand colors. I think you picked some amazing color schemes. I might be slightly biased with those colors, but it's good to see another yellow and black brand out there, man.
Yeah. Hey, look, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I know we were just talking about that. So I'm a Steelers fan.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of correlate what I grew up with my childhood into what I do every day. So
no, that's awesome.
Always a story behind stuff, right?
Really good logo, by the way, too. A really, really nice lockup. Very well executed.
I appreciate it. Yeah, especially coming from you, man. That definitely means a lot. So Dan, before we get too far into this, who are you? How'd you get here today? Give us your story, man.
So I run a branding agency here in New Jersey. We have about 38 people, I think, at this point. We specialize in doing brand development for home service companies. So HVAC, plumbing, painting, electrical contractors, roofing, garage doors, any of those industries. And, we focus on building, brands that are very unique, very disruptive in the market. We try to leverage the opportunity that each vehicle has out in the street and make the most of those opportunities, with the whole idea and the mindset of how can we help our clients' brands become famous within their community, or that notion of 5 mile famous. I started the agency. This is next year will actually be our 30th year, which is just kind of blows my mind. I started hand lettering as really the roots of how I got here. Probably when I was 15, it was the first time I hand lettered a van, and it was for a plumbing contractor. I actually have a picture of it. It's kind of funny. I have my mullet and everything, so it looks pretty sweet. And, I love just building brand. Yeah, there it is. You got it, man.
Yeah. For anyone watching it. Yeah. It's that mullet's hot, man.
So, I just was fascinated with working with logos. I was fascinated with working with entrepreneurs as well. And I just always thought it would be a really great thing for a small business if they had a single source to go to for their marketing, so that everything was consistent. So you could get a logo done, you could get your truck done, you could get your uniforms, your business cards, your brochures. We used to do a lot of web design. We're not in that line of business right now, but at that point, in the late 90s, I was doing all those things. So I always thought the logo was central to everything, and everything should match. And, a lot of the studies I've done over the years and the research I put into it is really meant to try to figure out how do you build brands that connect with the consumer? How do you build brands that have the consumer believe there's a reason why they should choose you? There's a reason why they should pay more for your services. And how do you rent space in their minds? Ultimately, you on the digital marketing side, I'm sure how much better it is when someone types in the name of a contractor instead of painting contractor near me, right? So what do we do to build a brand that lives in someone's mind, so that when they are ready for service, they're like, oh, what was that company that I just saw at my neighbor's driveway? They look like they did good work. Let me just Google their name, right? And so that's ultimately, in a nutshell, what we're doing with brands is trying to figure out how to live in people's minds.
So good. Becoming memorable, which I want to touch on here in a moment. So Dan, I read your book. You sent this in the mail. I was anticipating on, scanning it, coming up with a few bullet points to, talk through this, but it's good. It's really, really good. There are a lot of concepts that I've always had in my mind that you've conceptualized and broken down for just about anybody to understand. to the point where like I have highlighted at least one line on every single page in this book.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this is obviously not your first rodeo, and this book is obviously not just a lead magnet. It's packed full of value. And I want to go deep into this because, there's a lot of concepts in here that, regardless of whether you already have a brand that's well established or you think it is, there's a lot of concepts that you can apply to an existing brand or come up with if you're considering rebranding in the future. But I want to come up with just a brief softball question to kick off this conversation. So let's start with the basics. I think a lot of guys listening in understand what branding is, or they think they understand it, but consider a logo and a style guide their brand, or they consider that a branding agency is for like a large scale corporate company, right? So what is a brand and why is it important?
Yeah, I think you have to consider that it's a number of things, right? And I think people want to try to distill it into something. And, you hear people use the phrase, oh, a brand is what people say about you behind your back. Or a brand is how someone would describe your company to someone else. And there's some truth to that. I look at it as the sum of all the things that you are doing and what those messages are communicating. So if you think about a brand and you think about a brand as a wheel, and I know I have that analogy in the book, the brand wheel, and in the center of that brand wheel is your logo, and then you have all the spokes going around. They would include your digital, your social media voice, your trucks, your uniforms, your business cards, your collateral, all those elements. All those things stem from that center part, that hub, right? So if you don't get that logo correct, that wheel will not spin very efficiently, okay? And it's also be something where different elements are maybe communicating different things to the consumer, making it confusing to a certain extent. Yeah. So we're trying to figure out, again, what does the brand communicate, not only externally, meaning I don't know anything at all about your company, but I saw your truck and I saw your logo somewhere. What did it make me think about? What did it make me feel? You're going to go there eventually, hopefully, and do the job, and you're going to leave an impression on that experience. What the brand is trying to do is trying to control that impression before you actually deliver that service. So if I can have Mrs. Jones believe that the experience is going to be amazing if she hired you, before you even get to ring the doorbell, before she hits your homepage on your website, then that's part of what the brand is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be delivering a promise to them, sort of inferred by the visuals that they're receiving and the messages that they're reading, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I want to jump into a question that may trigger some people. And that is the hallmarks of poor branding. So there's an entire, I think, chapter that goes deep on this. So like, what does that look like in, let's say, the professional painting industry, right? Like the hallmarks of a poor brand in your experience, what does that look like?
So, I mean, a lot of different things. So you have naming as the first thing you look at. So, I know there's an entire chapter in the book about naming. So you have names that historically are very, very difficult to become sticky and deliver promise. So you have last name brands, which typically are very difficult and challenging. You have brand names that use initials like TJS Painting, right? Why do I think TJS Painting is going to be amazing? Like, is there something in the name that makes me believe that experience is going to be amazing? Is there something about those initials that I would be able to recall in a month when I actually need painting done at my house? So naming is the first piece, right? Then the next piece is, what does the brand actually look like? What does the brand actually communicate? And if you go on Google and you Google painting contractor logos and you see what shows up in the search results, they're all going to look pretty much the same. So if your brand looks pretty much like the search results, then why would anyone remember your brand specifically, right? So the idea of blending in, right? That's, we call that blanding. So, but I got a logo on the side of my truck. Terrific. Is there any reason why anyone would ever recall that later on? Is there something compelling about that visual that is interesting to them, that connects to them on any deeper level? So those are part of the hallmarks. As a matter of fact, too, I've got it here because I've spoken on it. It's called a KickCharge Spark Test. And I've spoken at many events, and we actually run through this test, and it's basically 10 different criteria to judge your own brand. And if you go on YouTube and you go to our channel, our KickCharge channel on YouTube, You could take the test along with me presenting it on this video. I spoke at Tommy Mello's event, and the whole audience participated in it. So like, if you're not sure, hey, do I really have, not a great brand? Because again, most people don't know, right? You could literally go on and follow this video and take the test yourself and then rate yourself. But certainly, the clip art, the colors that are not unique, that you can't own. It's really surprising to me that the painting industry, and I'm going to generalize here, but they don't seem to really embrace the notion of full wraps, for one thing, on their vehicles, and investing in branding. So ironic, of all places, we needed to have some paint work done here in the office. And I've got a painter that I've been using at my house. He's amazing, but he literally showed up here with a huge van. It was an extended Econoline, I think, or Chevy Express, with a magnetic sign on the back, like a 12 by 18 magnetic sign. And I'm just like, oh, the irony here of him being at our office. But he does amazing work, and I always look at him like, I feel so sad, because I'm just like, oh man, like the things we could do for him. But again, too, some people are just happy with a few jobs a week, and they're not trying to kill the world, and that's all they want to achieve, and that's fine too, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to scale and get beyond just being you as the person that's doing the work, then you really start needing to think about marketing in a much different way for your painting business.
Couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that you brought up like using your last name in the business. I see that so often. And to your point, it can be challenging. And I found that part of the book extremely fascinating. Another part is using Inc. and LLC in the name. Can we talk about that for a moment and why that's not required?
Yeah, it's just really funny to me that and I don't know who perpetuates this myth, but that you're supposed to have LLC in your logo or Inc. in your logo if you are an LLC or an S corp. And I always say, well, if that's true, then why doesn't McDonald's have Inc. in their logo, or Apple? Apple is an S corp. You don't see their logo saying Apple and then Inc. next to it, like in little small letters. Right. So it's absolutely never required to have that designation in a logo. To me, it's the surest sign that whoever designed it for you does not know anything at all about branding as one basic fundamental thing that they should know. So, we always joke about it. And we've got probably over 3,000 logos and brands that we've created here over the last 30 years. And not one of them says Inc. or LLC. And thus far, the Inc. and LLC police have never, gone after any of our clients. So when you have a contract, you can put the full legal name of your company in your contracts, like in small letters next to your address or something like that. That's fine. But there's absolutely no reason ever to have Inc. or LLC in your logo.
Love that. Yeah, we see that so often. So I want to talk about some additional hallmarks of poor branding. I'm going to quote a few lines from your book here. Your logo is created from a template, clip art, or contains a photo. It's illegible from a distance. This is my favorite one. Your logo contains a mascot that looks like it could beat the crap out of you. So overly masculine when your target audience is likely female. What do you say to a business owner that maybe checks some of those boxes, but likes how their brand looks and they feel like they're good to go anyways?
So the thing to think about is whether or not you like it is somewhat irrelevant, because you're not who you're selling to. It's, does Mrs. Jones like it? So you always have to reframe the question about what does the brand communicate to the person who is most likely to buy your services. I get it that you really probably want to like your own brand. Like that would be somewhat weird if you hated your own brand. But at the end of the day, when we're creating brands, my primary objective is to figure out a strategy that will connect to the person that you're selling to. I want your input on it. And if you say, I want to be retro nostalgic with a mascot, fine. Like I can work with that, because you can do that in a way that will still appeal to that target audience. But always frame the question differently, in the sense of identify who your ideal audience looks like and decide whether or not it appeals to you. That's why the comment about the overly aggressive mascots is something that, we see it all the time, where you've got a heavily muscled mascot and he's running towards you and he's carrying a tool. Maybe it's a pipe wrench or something like that. And yeah, he looks like he's going to beat the shit out of you. I mean, at that point, it's like, I don't think Mrs. Jones is going to connect with that, because Mrs. Jones is already scared about who's coming to her home in the first place. So I don't want to add to her anxiety by presenting an image that would make her feel unease in any way, right? So I'd rather be, a teddy bear that's cute and cuddly, rather than super muscled, aggressive, mascot dude. It just doesn't connect with her. It sort of scares her already. And that's what we're trying to diffuse. We're trying to make her, again, feel comfortable with who's going to ring her doorbell.
Love it. Yeah. And, to quote your book again here, contrary to what many business owners believe, the most important audience for their brand is not themselves. I think you've absolutely nailed it. Is, how you feel doesn't all matter all that much. And it's almost like we're putting, an audience in front of you to, really give you feedback here. And that's where your expertise comes in as a branding agency. So while we're on the topic of naming and hallmarks of poor branding, I had a client once state that taglines are only for cereal boxes. So Dan, why was this man undereducated, and why are taglines important to the painting industry?
Taglines do a lot to also just help make the brand itself more sticky. So when we write taglines, we're thinking of the visual that's already been created with that logo. We're thinking about the name that connects the visual to that name. And now the tagline helps deliver the promise, right? So the tagline is something that will aid in making it more memorable to remember in the future, right? And then it will also help connect all these pieces together. Well, why do you have this mascot? Why is your name this? You look at the brand that we did. A great example is a brand that we created and named for a heating and air company out in Albany called Grasshopper. And that was a name we came up with. You probably read the story in the book about how that came to be, but grasshoppers can only move forward, right? They can't actually go backwards. So we kind of latched onto that as part of their tagline, with the notion of forward is a way of life. So that not only speaks to the notion that we as a company will move your household forward with a solution that will make your home more comfortable, et cetera, but internally, it also speaks to your employees. We are going to grow as a company and always be moving forward, always training our team to be better and continuing to move the path forward. So taglines are good, all those things about being more memorable and aiding in that piece, but it also is a good rallying cry for your internal audience, meaning your employees, and what the company stands for. What is our why? And how do we encapsulate that in a tagline? One of the other brands we did was a company that was initial based. It was called RW Garage, and we renamed them Right Way, right? Because RW doesn't mean anything, but Right Way certainly means something. And that tagline to go along with it, we do things ... the right way. So that's how we integrated the tagline into that. So not only now as a consumer, I'm like, okay, well, they're going to really do things the right way. And as an employee, that's communicated from day one. We will do things here the right way. That's how it works here. So it's not just for marketing purposes, it's also for internal marketing as well.
So let's dive into that, because this is actually a point that I wanted to touch on that I found fascinating. And also, by the way, I saw you mentioned Traction by Gina Wickman. Are you guys running on EOS?
So I would say we're pseudo running on EOS, meaning that we went through the process. We followed all the steps in the book, and then we made significant changes after reading that book.
Sure.
Yep. I would say we could probably use maybe a refresher, because when we did it, we were about 15 employees, and we've more than doubled in size. So I think it probably would be a good exercise to go through that. But I definitely recommend that book for people that are trying to figure out the best way to grow. I think it's more useful once you start getting into double digits of employees, rather than when you're 3 employees into it. But
Couldn't agree more. And, I wanted to tie in the internal branding aspect of EOS for anybody listening in. We did a podcast early on about EOS with an actual implementer talking through what entrepreneurial operating system looks like and how to go about implementing it. It's a great platform. It's a great framework for your business to come up with a meeting structure and all that fun stuff. But the thing that I think anybody can benefit from, no matter what your company size is coming up with a vision, right? Like core values, identifying how you're going to hold your team accountable. And what that looks like when we look at branding and team culture, how that ties to a company vision and how it correlates to your core values and such, you start to understand how a simple logo can ultimately, guide the pride of your team and, how they answer the phones and the energy they show up to work with. And you start to understand that a simple logo is much more than just something you slap on the side of a truck, right? So, did I go too deep there, or is that kind of how you guys envision branding as a whole?
No, I think that's, I think spot on, and a lot of things you say really make a lot of sense. You think about, like, even for our own tagline is legendary home service branding, right? So that kind of reinforces like what we do. But if you think about vision, mission, those aspects, and I kind of associate that a little bit more with the notion of what is our why, right? So our why is very simply, we build brands that change lives, right? That's really the foundation of literally everything that we do here, is the notion that our work is so critical to the success of the people who are trusting us with that task. And we need to always be cognizant of the fact that we need to be the best at our craft to make sure that we can help these companies succeed. So we're constantly reinforcing that internally, and sharing the impact that our work has with the team. Because sometimes, listen, we're doing so much work, we're cranking out so much work. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that why, right? But then you get that email from the customer and, hey, we were able to hire 10 more people, or hey, revenue grew by 120% year over year, or whatever the numbers are. And that is very deliberately shared with everyone on the team to continue to reinforce them that our work changes lives. And not only that, the notion that we need to design as if lives were at stake. And that's one of the things about like this business in general that we take so seriously, right? Because if you screw this up, like, you could really hurt a business, right? We're suggesting things that if you don't know what you're doing, could be detrimental, like name changes. Like, we'll rename probably 50 or 60 home service companies this year. That is not a task that you enter in lightly, because if you screw that up, you could really screw up their business, right? So we take that responsibility so seriously. It's so important to communicate that why on a regular basis to your team. And I think identifying, you as a company, what is your why, and how do you communicate to your internal audience that why, and also your external audience, because again, you're trying to give them a reason as to why and how you are different, and not everybody is also the right customer for you as well. You have people looking for the cheapest painter, right? And don't care about the quality. And that's probably not the audience that you're focused on. But a lot of times too, your branding is going to attract the wrong audience. So what does the brand speak to the people that you are trying to connect to? Does it look premium and high end, or does it look cheap and, not professional, right? So that's so much like you think about, and I talk about in the book, like, how is average tickets being affected by those messages, right? Why does Mrs. Jones feel like she should pay you more than the other guy who shows up with that white van with the magnetic sign on there, right? I don't feel like he's going to do an amazing job based on what he's presenting me. Maybe he's awesome. Like the example here, our guy is awesome. The only reason why I know he's awesome is because I used him at my home before, because he was recommended by someone. So my wife hired him. But if I had to judge him by what he rolled up my driveway in, I can't get there. Yep. I don't see a reason why I'm paying him a premium yet. I've experienced his service, so now maybe I can justify it. But think about how many missed opportunities maybe he had because people didn't believe that he should be charging what he's charging. And he wasn't cheap, but to me, he's a really great painter does amazing service. The whole notion too is you have to think about it. Many of these companies provide a great service. They just don't look like they do, right? So I'm not trying to put, lipstick on a pig and make, a shitty contractor look amazing. That's not who hires us. Like, people who hire us do great service. Like, they leave and the customer's overjoyed. They just don't look like they do great service, right? So what happens when you marry those two things up? I'm sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but
no, that segues perfectly into what I wanted to discuss next, which is the benefits of branding. When we look at ROI, exclusivity, higher average project sizes, you have a few pages in here that focus entirely on the cost of branding, or rather the cost of not branding. And just to have a few one-liners here that I really found interesting is like, the weaker your brand, the more you're going to spend on marketing. The most expensive logo you're ever going to buy is the one you pay the least for. And you're likely to pay a premium for a premium brand experience. So you bring up the example of paying $6 for Starbucks over $1 versus over $1 for Folgers. And I know most business owners consider branding a cost or like a nice to have rather than an investment. So like, how do you sell the ROI for branding?
Well, I think it's funny because here's the irony. You'll like that quote, overspending on marketing is the tax you pay for being unremarkable. And that notion of, you have companies that think nothing at all of spending a couple of grand a month to Google to try to deliver leads to them, instead of focusing on the idea of, how do I become famous in my own community so they know my name, so I'm not a slave to Google, right? So we have stats where we had a digital marketing company that focuses on HVAC. He's built the websites and does the digital marketing for over 25 KickCharge clients. So he's working with brands that we've created. He built their website. And I said to him, do me a solid, like, compare the results of those 25 with 25 other ones. And let's summarize. Let's see what's actually really happening here. And see if we can draw some conclusions, right? So we looked at the data of those 25, and the 25 companies that had the brands that we had created were generating on average 10 times the amount of organic keyword searches for their brand name on average. So you say, okay, well, they're getting 10 times as many people searching for their name than the poor brands. So that's great. Okay, so now they come into the site, right? What happens to the conversion rate? Right. So that's another one. And you probably know, conversion rates north of 10% are considered to be pretty solid, right?
Totally.
Right. So they looked at the conversion rates of the 25 brands that we didn't create, and they were about 6%. And the conversion rates of the brands that we had created on the 25 was 12%. So now you're getting double the conversion rates with a better brand, and you're getting 10 times the amount of inbound traffic for your branded keyword, which is going to convert better anyway, right? So it's just, you look at the data like that, and it's like, some people are, oh my God, branding is so expensive. And I was like, okay, but so $3-4 grand for the rest of your life to Google is not expensive? Like, so you make the one-time investment in trying to build a brand, again, that's going to accomplish so many of those other things, higher average tickets, better booking rates, better close rates, all those other things. But not investing in them. Yeah, I'm totally cool with just always overspending on my marketing, right? So it just doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. But I also understand that that's why I wrote the book. Like, you don't know what you don't know, you know, and most of the people that they've gone to aren't the ones that are going to tell them that their brand is poor. But when you're working with a better branded company, right, that's visible in the community, that has, the site signs, their uniforms, the trucks dialed in, that your success with that company on their digital marketing is going to be superior, right? But most people, they'll take the money and they'll do the best they can, but they don't have that hard conversation and say, hey, listen, you know what, dude, like, your logo's not doing well or helping you here. That's kind of like telling someone that their kid is ugly. Like, I get it. But, I guess I haven't been shy about telling people that sometimes, but I also want them to win. Like I see opportunity when I see poor branding, because I'm like, oh my God, man, imagine we dialed this thing in for you. Like you would be doing so much better. So
fascinating. And you have a fun fact from page 67 that, and this is specific to the painting industry. I know you had some other stats in there for some other home service industries, but 86 of prosumers typically do not have a painting company in mind when they begin searching for the services online.
yeah.
And a few other great one-liners on the marketing front that I found is overspending on marketing is the tax you pay for being unremarkable. Success in spite of poor branding is not a valid reason to perpetuate it. I love that. I think the bottom line here is, like, we have clients that have that's actually have worked with you guys in the past that have their vehicles wrapped. They look great. And they will actually have their guys take the long way to a job, or will drive around. They'll fill up the tank and just drive around neighborhoods, even if they don't have any estimates that morning, specifically because it is a low cost way to get your name out there and to have your brand represented. And people think you're constantly busy if they see your vans driving around all the time. Right.
Right.
So,
right.
I want to talk about vehicle wraps and, why yours all look so badass. Like every single vehicle wrap I have seen, there's a bunch of them in this book. They all look just incredible. So let's talk about that. Where do you guys start? And kind of like, how does that relate to the overall branding structure of what you guys do?
Yeah. So great question about that. You said the first statement you made about the 86% is the stat that should scare the shit out of every contractor. That means that 86% of the people have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I'm going to have to spend on Google to get people to know who I am, right? Or other areas. So the reason why the truck becomes so critical, and the reason why most fail in terms of delivering that great promise and being disruptive and being memorable, all stems from the logo itself. So you will never have an effective truck wrap with a poor logo. It will never happen. It's one of the reasons why we won't work with an existing logo that you have if I am certain that I can't get it to perform well on a vehicle. So we always design with the end in mind. We're always like, okay, this logo is going to appear on the side of a van. How do I maximize that canvas? How do I design it in a way that has that impact that is disruptive? Whether it's the colors we use, whether it's the style we use, the naming that goes into it, those are all things that we're thinking about. I think about a brand that we did for a company in Orange County, California. It used to be called Orange County Painting. So, again, a name that's based on geography is generally not a great idea, because anyone outside of Orange County is like, well, they won't come here, right? So we renamed them Rock and Rollers. And we have this image, I think it's in the book, actually, kind of looks like Buddy Holly, and he's holding, a roller in his hand, and it's super memorable and it's super sticky, right? So again, thinking about how we maximize what that visual is going to look like on the side of that truck, and designing that logo so that it's optimized specifically for that application. Like sometimes you see people have logos and they're so vertical, and I'm like, this is never going to use the space effectively because it's way too tall. So you always have to be thinking about how it's going to live on that truck. And again, this is why colors are so important to the truck. So we do research for the market to say what colors are opportunities in your space, what colors are not being used. That's why we typically want to avoid red, white, and blue, because it's hard to own to begin with. There's a million HVAC contractors already using it. And why would somebody remember our red, white, and blue in comparison to the others, right? So you always want to be thinking about what colors can I own in my market? How can I implement them on a truck in a significant way? And that's, again, how you get sticky. And then the consumer sees one of them. Maybe you've only got one truck, but it's so disruptive that the second time they see it, they think they've seen it a million times. And that's the whole idea, too, behind making that truck effective, disruptive, while still delivering promise. And I think that's the other important thing too, is it's not just a question of making the truck disruptive, because like I say in the book, you can make the truck pink and purple with polka dots, and people would say they see it all the time, right? But what does it deliver as far as a promise? What is my expectation as the consumer that I'm going to get if I hire you? So don't just think about throwing a whole bunch of crap on the side of the van and it'll be super busy, and people will tell you, oh my God, we see your vans. it's not just seeing the vans, it's what does the van deliver in terms of a story, a promise, an expectation of service.
Yeah, love it. And actually, Alex and Rock and Rollers and his team, they are over here with Base Coat Marketing as well. They're great.
Awesome.
I know they spoke very highly of you. I think Alex actually made the introduction between us as well. So
okay, one of my favorite brands, one of my favorite painting brands I think we've ever done.
Yeah,
they were super cool to work with. You know, he sent pictures of the van parked in front of a home. He's got the site sign next to it. Like everything is just so dialed in. And you know, again, that's the thing sometimes too, because painting. Maybe you're in that house, you know, once, and then they don't need painting for 3 years. Like, do they even remember your name at that point? If it was TJ painting and, you know what I mean? Like, so what have you done to become sticky and memorable? And that's why some of those other names are just, I'll never remember them. But Rock and Rollers, I'm pretty sure you're going to remember just because it's so unique and so fresh and different.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, one of the common questions that we hear in particular on the print marketing side, which we don't do, is, hey, like, what should I put on my vehicle wrap or my yard sign? You break this down with a brief hierarchy of brand, website, tagline, phone number. So no QR code, no social media icons?
No. And probably not even a phone number, honestly, at this point. I'd say only half the wraps we do have a phone number. Think about the last time you actually dialed your phone, like with a number, like a series of numbers. When was the last time you literally dialed on your cell phone a series of numbers? More likely you went on Google and you found the number of the company you were trying to reach and you just hit call now, right? So again, you have to remember that the vehicle is not a direct response mechanism. It's not meant to be direct response. The amount of people that will need your service that see your truck on a daily basis is really, really small. So it's not like, oh my God, I see the painting van and I need to paint my laundry room next week. I'm so glad it just passed in front of me. I'm going to call them right this second. Now you may get that to happen sometimes, but it's not the method that medium is meant to work as, right? So branding the name, I want it to be sticky. I want it to be memorable. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of other crap on there that will detract from your name and your brand name. Like I want to make sure that that's the most important piece. Social media icons. Okay. So you're on Facebook and Instagram. Okay. So like, isn't every reputable company on Facebook and Instagram? Like, why is that unique to you? And then the QR codes. I mean, listen, you know, people want to put them on there. We have never done it. I understand people say, oh my God, we have people scan our QR code, so it must be working. Well, they could have also just gone to your website and done the same thing. So if you've ever tried to scan a QR code while you're driving, that's really, really challenging to do. Like I've tried to do it as a passenger. And I'm just thinking like in what circumstances, maybe it's parked in Home Depot. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to scan it right now. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could, but you couldn't get there by just looking at their website or just Googling their brand name. Like I don't know what value we're adding. So, you know, to me, those things add clutter, and I'm all about as clean as I can make this truck wrap. I don't want to have anything on there that doesn't add a significant amount of value. You know, if you could put a QR code on, and I suppose if it didn't infringe on all the other things that I had as being important, you know, fine. But again, it's not a direct response mechanism. Site signs, the same thing. You see guys put a whole book on a site sign. Like, the car driving by, it's 18 by 24. Like, what are you expecting them to be able to read at that point? So again, more about the brand name, maybe the website, and that's really it. I'm not going to put a whole bullet list of a million things on there. If your name should communicate that inherently already.
So good. And that probably triggered a bunch of people knowing that it's a common intuition to like throw a phone number up there. And the thing about QR codes that I love is you don't know whether it's going to go to a phone number or a website. So like what's on the other side of that QR code is kind of a black box as well. But I think it's common sense once you break it down, because a lot of guys aren't thinking about their audience on the other side of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So I was just at a 6-day Tony Robbins business mastery event this week, in fact, and we had Donald Miller of Story Brand on there for an entire afternoon talking about his whole Story Brand concept. It's a concept that we use internally here for content writing, involving a guide and a hero. So what is Story Brand? Why is it important? And how does that correlate to a company's brand identity?
Sure. Yeah. And we're actually launching like, I know about what his book reads, and there's aspects of that I think are amazing. There's aspects of it that I think we're taking and not really we're taking from him, but we're thinking about what is the most critical aspects for a home service contractor that are actionable that you can do with the story, because it's fine to have a lot of pie in the sky stuff, but how does it actually translate into real world applications is really the most important thing. So
Sure.
we're doing something where we're really considering not just the brand story itself, but the voice of the brand and how are those things related to one another. So when you think about when you make a social media post from your painting business, what does it sound like? Does it have an attitude? Is it funny? Is it edgy? Is it sarcastic? Like, what are the things that voice communicates? And then how does that connect to the brand itself? So if you have a brand that is very playful, maybe it's mascot driven. Like if we did a brand voice guide for rock and rollers, like there would be some fun things that we would have as part of that. We would have some fun headlines. We would have things that would be very unique and very specific to that brand only, that would never work for any other contractor, painting contractor, because it's all about how all these things live together and speak to one another, and speak to your audience, of course. So I think the concept is good. I think the thing that you have to make it actionable, so that why do we have this brand voice and how does it going to affect how I run my marketing is the biggest question that you have to ask yourself when developing a brand story guide. And that's what I'm super excited. We're going to probably launch that product probably within 3 months. And I think it's going to be awesome. We do a lot of visual brand guides where it's much more comprehensive than just the initial brand guides that we developed, where we'll strategize, again, what do all the other deliverables look like, your site signs, your uniforms and business cards and billboards, all those other things. But I think that piece is something that is, we're stoked to be able to offer that, because I think it completes everything, instead of just having the beautiful visuals to go with it. Like now we'll have the storylines that go with those beautiful visuals. And I think it'll make a lot more sense.
Absolutely. And you even bring up one point in the book about if you can replace your business name with your competitors on your website and it sounds the same, we're probably not having that voice hit right. And, and I think it correlates back to the internal branding as well. I had a meeting with our team last Friday and we talked about the fact that you spend half of your waking hours during the week, about a third of your life at a job, right? And how do we make that fun? And, that correlates back to your brand voice and, why? What's your why? Why do you show up every day? And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark on logos. It goes way beyond with the logo, right?
Yeah. And I think that point about the content on your website, the content on your social media page, like literally, again, if you could just go on your own website and every time it said your name, replace it with your biggest competitor. And if all the content still read and made sense, then why would the consumer think that the service or the deliverable from you is going to be any different, right? So when we create brands, and we do a lot of copywriting for websites, even though we don't design websites, but I love our copywriters because they always capture the vibe of that particular brand. And there's no way that you would be able to just swap their name with their competitors. It would make no sense. Like it would be, why are they talking like that? Because their brand is, red and blue arrows and we've got Cool Willies as their mascot. Like this makes no sense, right? So branded copy, I think, and I'm sure like when you write branded copy that's compelling, it keeps the viewer on the page longer and they want to learn more. They want to read into it because it's not just this, this dump of just HVAC terms or painting terms. What, you know what I mean? So like, it's just a big piece of it. And I think people don't appreciate branded copy as much as they should, or I'm just going to go and chat GPT and spit out a bunch of content and paste it on my site and it'll be great. Like everyone will, so the notion of making that content unique to you is so important.
Yeah. And, to your point, if you go back to that wheel, it all starts with your logo and your brand. Otherwise, if we're starting with a last name and a painting company, that's not a lot to work with. Right.
Right.
So I think this is
Yeah.
where, going back to the starting point, branding, you need to start with that, your domain name, your social accounts, making sure those are all available. And then you expand and extrapolate from there.
Right. Right.
So, all right. We talked a lot about just like design is meant to stand out, not to fit in. You talk a lot about being memorable. So I wanted to kind of tie that back to the opening part of this conversation here. If you had one thing to scream from the rooftop, that anyone listening in could implement and find more success in their life and business, what would that be?
One thing that they could scream and
And you could
implement, I would say, just thinking about, again, if you handed your business card to someone on an elevator, and my New York accent just came out there really good there, by the way. What would they think the experience would be like if they hired you? And I think that that's the ultimate bench test. Years ago, we used to call it sort of the business card test, because a lot of judgments are made by that business card. When you receive that business card, you either think cheap, or ideally you think premium. But if you hand out that business card and it's not met with a reaction of some sort, then chances are everything else is met with a similar reaction. Your uniforms, your truck, your website. If it's just blah, then you're missing that opportunity to be memorable. And I think that that's the ultimate goal. And that's, again, the notion of being blanded versus branded.
So good. So Dan, if someone was interested in becoming more memorable with KickCharge Creative, what did your process look like? What's your average cost look like? And how would they go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah. So our process first starts with research. So what does your market look like? Who are your biggest competitors? What do their brands look like? What color schemes are they using? What other companies are in your market that are maybe not painting contractors, but large HVAC companies? I need to know what those brand colors look like, because those vehicles are saturated in your market as well. So I don't want to put a color scheme that would be confusing with that market as well. We want to know what brands we've created, perhaps that you like, what brands we've created, perhaps you don't like, with the mindset, again, that it's Mrs. Jones who's ultimately the person that we're selling to, because the women are making, I think it's in excess of 80% of the home purchase decisions are being made by women. So we want to make sure that the brand is speaking to them. As far as cost for us between the brand development piece and the wrap design, it's about $20,000. You'll get a pretty comprehensive brand guide along with that package, so that, again, if you needed someone else to work on something that wasn't us, you have at least a roadmap that they can follow. All the files are included, the colors, the RGB colors. So if you're working with a digital marketing company, you could give them this brand guide. They know exactly what colors your brand should be using, things like that. Typically, we do usually like 3 or so different concepts. We have a budget of around 60 to 70 hours that we devote for every brand that we develop. And all the artwork that we do is original. So that's the other piece too, when we talk about the hallmarks of bad branding. Like, if your logo is developed from clip art, first of all, you can't trademark it. And secondly, there's nothing stopping a competitor from using the exact same artwork. You have literally no recourse at that point. So we, of course, don't use clip art. We have a team of 6 full-time brand developers and illustrators on staff that, create these things. The Rock and Rollers brand was developed by one of my designers that's been with me 20 years almost at this point. And even that particular logo, like the lettering for Rock and Rollers itself, is not a font. It was actually drawn and hand sketched from scratch, because we couldn't find the right font to communicate exactly the vibe that we wanted. So in those instances, we'll just build it out from scratch. There's no reason to use a font at that point, because we have the ability to just create something from scratch. But you look at the quality of an illustration like that, and you compare it to something you might find on iStock. And that's the other thing too, when it comes to illustration, is to really understand the difference of mascot development and how it functions on a vehicle is the most critical application, and it's the one that is failing most often. So there's a few people online that, you know, are doing branding. And sadly, the mascots were never intended to be used on a truck. And so they disappear from a distance. They don't have the right composition to make them visible from a distance. So those are just, again, all things that maybe the layperson maybe doesn't understand. They look at it on a screen. They say, oh my God, this will be fine on the side of my truck. But then they realize you step back from 15 feet and everything just blends and disappears. So there's a lot of thought that goes into how we develop those mascots and those brands. There's a lot of really, really bad mascot branding being put out, sadly. That looks amateurish. So that's the flip side of the coin when you think about, again, what does the brand communicate? And even though you may think you've hired a professional, if they don't understand anatomy, composition, and, you know, illustrative techniques, now you've just succeeded in kind of making your own brand look amateurish, even though in theory, supposedly you hired someone that should know how to do that. So, you know, just some things to keep in mind as you're looking for someone to work with.
Yeah. And I would go as far to say that the ROI that you can expect from something like this would justify itself easily within a 12-month time frame, if not sooner, especially if you're spending money on advertising channels online. Right. To your point, it's the correlation of the results you get if you keep spending the same, or the ability for you to spend less and get the same results. It's there. It's hard data. We can prove that as well. And it just makes marketing so much easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So kickchargecreative.com. Dan, I appreciate you being here again, man. For anyone who is interested in reading this book, Branded, Not Blanded, you get it on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon or on our site. It's actually kickcharge.com, no creative, but I think KickCharge Creative might get you there too. But
okay, got it. Yeah, and I promise you, I have so many highlighted pages in this book. It's worth a read. Dan, thank you again for being here, man.
Awesome. Appreciate the opportunity, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
Cheers. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on that episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that chat as much as I did. Now, listen, if you guys are hungry for more conversations like this, go swing by our website. It's basecoatmarketing.com/podcast. And finally, we are very open to feedback. So if we haven't covered a topic or there's someone you want us to chat with, please let us know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next conversation for painters.